Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 20.
Episode 20. I mean, divisible by 10 and by 5 and by 2. This is just hitting all the check boxes for people.
Yeah,
Episode 20 is usually a big 20 is a big number for normal human beings,
and it's just it's like an anniversary of sorts. So wow, we've been doing this for 20 episodes now.
which is what, 40 weeks, almost a full year.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you put it that way, it doesn't sound like very long. And at the same time, I feel like I talk to you constantly, so
Well, here we are. So last time in episode 19, we talked about the death of Sam Lloyd, the man who plays the character Ted in the television series Scrubs that played from 2001 till 2010. How old were you then?
well, when Scrubs was on
How old were you in 2001?
in 2001. In 2001, I was 17 years old and I had just gone to the Air Force Academy.
Okay, so did you have time to watch TV at the academy?
You weren't allowed to own a TV until you were a junior.
So you didn't watch Scrubs when it first came out?
No, I didn't watch Scrubs until it was syndicated. But I've since seen all of the episodes multiple times and can quote several of them start to finish.
Yeah. Well, and your memory is uncanny for that kind of thing. Because last time, the challenge, I believe, is as I documented it on the podcast, was for us to pick out our favorite episode about Ted and kind of reminisce about Sam Lloyd since he just died. And I realized that it wasn't bounded enough of a challenge because short of going back and trying to rewatch all the episodes, Ted's just a minor bit character and he just pops up here and there and you kind of get a sense of him over the course of the broader scale of it. There's no like full episode about him or anything like that.
There was one episode they did in one of the later seasons where they took the perspective away from JD and the voice in his head. And they did this, they've done it a couple of times where they focus on other characters and there are other of the secondary or tertiary characters that then have the running dialogue and the narration for the episode.
Ah.
And that there was an episode where Ted was one of 3 people. Like they couldn't give him his whole episode by himself because there's just not enough content there, like you're talking about. So it was him, Jordan, and I want to say Kelso, but I don't remember who the other people were. But he had kind of a third of an episode to himself.
All right, I'm vaguely remembering that. I'll have to go back and watch that one. But as I was looking at a couple of clips on YouTube and reading through some episode summaries and stuff like that, I was remembering. Okay, so his character is hilarious because he's just like this hopeless sad sack. Like there's this great little clip where she's like, Ted, he goes, "Am I a sad sack?" And she's like, "Ted, your pen is leaking." And he's like, "Oh," and then he's got his hand on his head and he realized he'd had his hand on the pen and then he got ink all over his head. He's like, "Oh."
Yeah, you really have to see that clip
at him, but I'll put it in the show notes. But also I think there's meant to be a sympathetic element to him. I mean, he is utterly and completely a sad sack in like every element of his life. I mean, he's just pathetic at everything. And yet he's kind of hopeful,
Pathetic at everything. How much Scrubs did you watch?
All right. He's randomly good at like weird things, like he's a really good singer, but he uses it to be in a barbershop quartet. So it's kind of like it's...
You do the things you love. You can't judge him for that.
Right. And that's the great thing about him is he's kind of a sad sack, but he's optimistic. He tries for the pretty girl. He wants to, be a famous singer. He aims high.
He competed in several triathlons.
Yeah, and that's the sympathetic part of it. The character Ted kind of speaks to the loser in all of us. Like, you keep getting up, keep trying. Everything's going to be okay. Just be positive.
What I love about Ted is that if you watch the whole series, you get those little snippets of him and you can see his whole life story kind of unfold and how he got to where he was.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of episodes they show where it's like a flashback back to when Kelso was still a doctor and like Ted had just shown up or whatever and he had a full head of hair and he's super upbeat and like, "Hey, how's it going? I'm the new lawyer. How's it going?" And it's like, "Oh, great. It's wonderful to meet you. Listen, I hate to ask you this. Can I get you to do me just one tiny personal favor? One time only, no problem." And then, of course, it flashes forward to present day set in the show where he's then waxing Kelso's car. Like it's part of his job.
Yeah. Yeah. as a sad sack would do. Now, one of the things I think is kind of the funny running joke that no one mentions is that he is utterly and completely incompetent at his only job at the hospital. Like, he is there to be the hospital's attorney, and he completely sucks at it, and no one ever seems to think that's a problem. Like, the doctors could get in trouble for malpractice, or, there could be any of a number of actual problems. But the fact that Ted is like the worst lawyer on earth doesn't seem to matter to anybody. His job is as secure as like a tenured professor.
Well, and is that a function of like the writers just need to have him in the show, or is that really how it is with kind of these like low budget teaching hospitals where they're on such a shoestring where they don't have maybe the best on-site legal staff?
I like that it never comes up. Like, they never say, maybe we need a better attorney at the hospital. It's always just like, Ted's it.
It's like, oh, well, here's the lawyer. Just like,
right.
Here's the bathroom and here's the lights.
Yeah. He is as inevitable as the bathroom. No one even thinks about remodeling. You just got to deal with the old linky bathroom with the sea green tiles.
I love Ted because, like, one of the writers I think we saw an interview, and they said it the best is whenever the writers needed to tell a joke that was kind of not within the realm of the primary characters, they would reach into what they called the weapons chest, and that was all the tertiary characters they had in the show.
Okay.
Like Ted, or I think Jordan was one of them, or any of the number of people that randomly walk in. Yeah, just random non-main characters. And Ted was one of the guys that they always had. Like, if we had kind of a sad or pathetic joke or just something that wouldn't make sense for Dr. Cox to say, we've always got Ted wandering around the hospital for some reason.
Nice. Yeah. So I last time I posted a clip of him talking. He looked like he was in a hospital himself, and just kind of saying farewell to the fans. So if you didn't watch that, check it out. Definitely good to say goodbye to Sam Lloyd. You and I did something interesting this week. We were taking a look at each other's Steam libraries. So to transition to a completely different thing, let's talk for a minute about games, since this is a podcast about games.
Woo!
We were comparing our Steam libraries, and for the uninitiated, Steam kind of revolutionized and did something I'd wanted like my whole life. And that was, computer software used to be that you had to go to a store and buy a box with discs inside of it and bring it home to your house and install the discs. And frequently, because there was also the potential that you could copy the discs, there would be copy protection protocols, which morphed and changed throughout my life, from like discs that had some like copy schemes on them that prevented them from being copied, to little codes you had to type in, to knowledge that you had to have. And none of it was good, but all of it was just about publishers trying to protect their intellectual property. Well, Steam is like the synthesis of the internet technology and the storage technology finally reaching the point where you have enough bandwidth and the things are fast enough that you can just subscribe to a service and then download the software that you need and have access to it based on your identity, but only in the realm of gaming. So Steam, I think it's owned by Valve, the same company that publishes Half-Life.
Yes, Steam is created and run by Valve.
Okay, but they have deals with other partners and independent producers and that kind of thing, and they have a giant library of games, and then you can just pay a fee and then be able to download them directly to your computer or any computer you own. So you don't have to worry about all those copy protections and problems with going between computers and things like that. As long as it's your identity, you have access to the software you paid for.
Right. You download Steam, you log into your account, and then any games that you've purchased are associated with your account, not the physical device that you installed them on or the disc that you have to own. Like this guy who logged in has these games, and so you get to play those games on that computer, regardless if it's your computer or not, as it should be. And it's funny, like, I laughed when you said, like, I think it's made by Valve, the guys that publish Half-Life. Like, it was really funny about that is, yes, Valve started as a game company that came out with like some of the best games of the late 90s, early 2000s, and then they created Steam. And there's this, like, you can read into the history of it where their entire like game development team like almost evaporated when they're like, whoa, there is way more money to be had over here in digital distribution. And that's where like all of the company's funding went.
Wow. Okay, I did not know that part of the story. Because
And
it does seem kind of odd to me that they're initially associate their name with the creation of one of the most popular game franchises of all time, but they haven't produced a whole lot of software, and a lot of this stuff is from other publishers that they have on their library.
most of the stuff they have is from other publishers. The other big thing about Steam that they are known for is they were the first real platform to give independent developers a place where they could upload their games. So you or I, if you or I as one person or as a team, as a Bad at Magic podcasting game creator software team created a game, there is a check and balance process that we would go through, but we could put it on Steam for sale for people to download and play.
Okay, so it's a publishing platform we could utilize to get access to the market.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember the exact time I first installed Steam. I think it was, and maybe it was the same for you. It was the first time where I wanted a game, and we were just starting to cross this threshold of, do I go to the store and buy it in a box, or do I get it online somewhere? And when I found out that it was available online, that was immediately my preferred option. So I don't remember what game I installed it for. It was probably Civilization 4. Sid Meier's Civilization 4 that I bought it and installed it for. And then that was the last time I ever bought a physical copy of a game in a store. I haven't since, other than like console titles.
That's a really interesting question because I'm looking through my library and I don't know. Like it's just been such a I've just had it. This is something that you've like your email address. Like you just had it for so long that you just forget when you got it or for what.
Yeah, I don't see a way to sort the library based on like how long it's been in your library or anything like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to do something useful in your game library? No, you can't do that.
Well, so one of the things I found that was interesting about it is, other than the fact where we've influenced each other's game choices a little bit, like for instance the Stanley Parable, which we discussed last time on episode 19, there's this interesting overlap between your library and my library, as in games that you have chosen and installed and played that I also have chosen and installed and played. There was only... Okay, so Half-Life 2, obviously, we both have in our Steam libraries, but I don't think there was any doubt about, you and I both playing that game. That's an interesting one in that I don't play a lot of first-person shooters, but that one I definitely have. Kingdoms and Castles. Tell me about that one. That's one that's in... Just for our listeners, I'll put I made a Venn diagram out of Josh and I's Steam libraries. I'll put a link in the show notes and put it up on the Facebook page. But Josh has 44 titles in his library, and I have 28 titles in my library. And of those 44 and 28, 7 of those are common between the two of us.
I'm actually gonna have to correct your math here because
I eliminated a few when I counted them because there was a few like duplicates and alternate versions and stuff like that.
Oh, no, I got that. That's not what I'm talking about. Like you asked me, like you're asking me about Kingdoms and Castles, this game that's in the green section, the overlapping portion of our Venn diagram.
Yeah.
I actually don't have Kingdoms and Castles. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Oh. Okay, that's weird.
I'm really glad you picked that one because it's perfect because I don't have it.
All right. Well, then I need to update my Venn diagram. So Half-Life 2, Team 4. Okay, so one time you recommended something called the Orange Box, which was just a group of Valve games that were all packaged together. And I installed them all and tried them. I think I played Team Fortress 2 maybe twice. It just wasn't my thing. Portal, definitely I played. Oh, and I forgot to put that in the comment section. Okay, my Venn diagram's all mixed up. I'll have to update it. Dang.
Oh, fail.
You recommended Papers, Please to me. That's on yours, and it's not on my Steam library. I think I got it directly from like the publisher's website instead of getting it through Steam.
Oh, okay.
Papers, which is probably better for them financially.
If nobody's ever played Papers, Please, I will talk about Papers, Please for like an hour. It's awesome in its weirdness because it's the premise of the game is you're a border guard or a checkpoint person, like a customs official. That's what you are. You're a customs official at the border between two like Soviet era nations, and like people are coming through, and it's like very hardcore like Russian music and things, and you're supposed to check passports and work visas and stuff for just random mistakes and things. But what's cool about it is there's the stories that they tell where you're just in a booth and you sit there and just process paperwork. But there are these stories that take place that you can actually influence just doing your paperwork. And that game's great.
Listeners, if you are hearing Josh describe a game that someone designed where you sit in a booth in a Soviet bloc country checking people's identification as they pass through a checkpoint and think that sounds like a really terrible job, you are right. It is a terrible job. Josh recommended this game to me, and I started playing it, and I was sitting there, like, feeling the pressure of my supervisors telling me that I wasn't checking people's identification fast enough, or that I was missing errors, or those kinds of things. And I thought, this sucks. This feels like I'm working in a Soviet bloc, in a booth in a Soviet bloc country, checking people's identification. That does. It sucks.
But did you play it enough to get some of the stories to come through?
No, I couldn't. I quit. I quit my job working for the proud country of Slovakia or whatever it was.
Arstotzka. Glory to Arstotzka.
Arstotzka.
No, listen. All right, so I'm going to tell. This is my favorite.
I think I'm in Siberia now.
This is one of the tiny little vignettes that happens in this game, right? It just, at the end of every day, it shows you, all right, here's how many papers you processed. Here's your pay from that. Here's how many you messed up. Here are your fines for messing up. And then you get the number at the bottom, like, this is how much you earned today. And then it's direct. This is how much you need to pay for food, heat, and lodging for your family, which is like you, your wife, your kid, and like your in-laws, I think, are the people that live in your house. But the thing is, you never see these people, this family. They are just like names, not even names. They just say like mother-in-law and status okay, or status hungry, or status cold on this spreadsheet at the end of every day.
Your family's starving if you aren't checking people's papers fast enough.
But you never see these people. They are literally not even names. They're just blocks on a.
I still felt the pressure. I still felt like I was failing as a provider.
Right. This is the thing. There's one day when you get done and a little notification pops up on that spreadsheet. It's like, oh, your son's birthday is coming up in 2 days. He would really like a box of crayons and some paper to color on. They cost this much. And it's like, ooh, I'm really going to have to turn and burn for these next 2 days if I'm going to be able to afford heat, food, and crayons for my kid. And I remember working my butt off, like going as fast as I could, and I got the money. No, this is the best.
This is a terrible idea for a game.
No, this is so good. Because then I was able to like check the box. Yes, go ahead and purchase those crayons and that coloring supplies for my son. And then the next day starts, and then you're in your little booth like before the day. Like you hit the green button for.
And you have a little colored picture of like I love my dad.
Yes, it's this little crayon picture
stuck to the wall.
My daddy, and it's like a stick figures. Yeah, and I hung it up on the wall. I'm like right out in the booth. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome, and you get to put it up there. And then the first lady that comes into the booth is like, oh, who colored this picture? He looks like he had was disabled or something.
Oh my God.
And this is the thing, Ben, like this son of yours isn't a real person. Like they don't exist. They're just.
But I wasn't good enough at it. I wasn't good enough at like remembering all the rules about what I was supposed to be looking for on these people's ID cards. I was just screwing up.
Well, you got to let me finish the story, because you at that point in the game you have the authority to throw people into jail. Whether it's right or wrong. And if it's wrong, you get fined. So she insulted your son. And she insulted your son. And so I sat there. Like, me as a gamer, this was a real good quality moment for me, because I'm like, all of your stuff checks out, but I'm going to throw you in jail anyway, because I have that authority, and you made fun of my kid's, like, coloring book drawing. And yeah. And then, like, the armed guards come in and haul her off, and you never see her again.
Dude, I've always wanted to do stuff like that since, like, The Legend of Zelda, when you get some sassy non-player character and you wish you could also stab them with the sword.
There's this great series on YouTube called Epic NPC Man. Have you ever heard of that?
No. Definitely not the kind of thing I watch on YouTube.
Fair enough. Like, I stumbled across it a couple months ago. My wife hates it because I binged it for, like, 2 days straight. And they're like 2 or 3 minute episodes of a guy dressed in medieval garb in front of like a cottage. And he's supposed to be like an NPC in a video game. And then just random video gamey type stuff like happens. Like a dude comes running up and is like, hey, sell me some of your cheese. And he's like, I'm sorry, sir, you don't have enough gold. He's like, oh. And the guy like reaches down and puts a bucket on his head and on the NPC guy's head and just steals all of his stuff and then runs off.
Yeah, and as we've gotten more and more into, like massive multiplayer online role-playing games where they've tried to make it so that you can do anything you want in a world, they've had to come up with ways with how to deal with that kind of thing. Like, if you just have a bunch of characters running around that have overpowered, highly armored things, what's to stop them just from walking into a shop and slaughtering every shopkeeper and stealing everything that they have?
The guards, the NPC guards that walk around, they're like 10
Yeah,
levels higher than you. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what it is.
exactly. It's their solution to that problem.
Have you ever watched a show? It's an anime called Sword Art Online.
No.
No. You might be interested in that. I'm not going to go into it. My wife is going to hate me for bringing it up on the podcast.
Okay. Well, then, since my list is inaccurate, do you see any others on this common list that you wanted to talk about?
Well, Darkest Dungeon is something that we share. I'm interested in
I haven't
the
played
idea
Darkest
that you
Dungeon.
got.
I have this problem. You'll see this when your kids start getting older. Of these that are on my list, of the 28 titles on my list, I've only played maybe 5 of them. Some of them are ones I bought and I intended to play. Others that I got and didn't like. And some are just because I have kids that like games, and those are in my library because my kids play them. Like Terraria and
Arkham Asylum.
Yeah. Well, no, I bought that one for me. I just couldn't get into it. Batman Arkham Asylum. But I got to tell you, right in the center that you and I don't overlap on, because you stopped with Civilization 4. It's Sid Meier's Civilization 5. I was asking you what title in your library you played the most. This is mine. I have played Sid Meier's Civilization 5 the most. I just looked at my playtime number of hours. 1,558 hours.
Holy cow, 1,000 hours?
At 1,500 hours.
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah, do you got any like that?
Oh, let me go. Let me see what I've got in Civ 4. I don't even have any game time listed in it. I did play Civ 4, but that was a long, long time ago. I don't know if I played. No, I must not have played this one because there's no time. I couldn't tell you, dude. Honestly, a lot of these games. Oh, actually, I say that. Okay, here's one. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the multiplayer. I got 168 hours in that.
Just nothing holds a candle to how much time I play Civilization. It's so so cathartic to me because it follows the pattern that I love, where I'm just making small individual decisions that aren't necessarily time sensitive, but it follows the path of the building of humanity over time from antiquity to the future, and you're making decisions in how to interact with other world leaders and economies and building trade routes and developing your cities and their science, and yeah, I just love it.
I don't even know what to say because I'm looking through as you're talking about it. Like I get Civilization, and this is the thing that I do with games is I kind of play them enough time to like get the gimmick. And then I don't know if it's a lot of times they'll lose me after that. It's like, okay, well, I get it.
Civilization's almost like, it's not like a role playing game. Like a first person shooter where there's a story, and then once you know the story, you know the story, and if you play it again, there's a slight bit of deviation, but it's still the same thing. But Civilization, it's more like playing Tetris to me. Like you get the thing, but you still just enjoy doing it.
Right. The problem that I had with Civilization is you can't really, like, if you sit down to play Civilization, you need to have like an hour. Like you're not just going to play for 10 or 15 minutes and then walk away from it. It's impossible.
Right.
Which brings me to the other 2 games that I've got a ton of time in. I have 166 hours in FTL and then 146 hours in Crypt of the Necrodancer. Both games of which you can play for like 5 or 10 minutes and then get up and walk away.
Oh, is Crypt of the Necrodancer that one you show me where like it looks like the Legend of Zelda, but you have to move in a rhythm?
So yes, Crypt of the Necrodancer is a top-down like dungeon crawler where, it's just like an RPG where like medieval times there's skeletons and stuff running around. And
but it rewards you doing things in time to the music.
You can only perform actions in time with the music, and so
how many hours have you spent on that one?
146.
Whoa!
And like a session is like 10 minutes, so yeah.
Huh.
But the thing, like, everything happens in the game. Like all the enemies move in specific rhythms, in specific patterns. Like all of the all the weapons have different abilities that they can do that you have to do in time with the music, and so it's like this weird mix of Dance Dance Revolution and Dungeons and Dragons.
All right. Well, let's invite the audience to join in. If you want to get on the Reddit or the Facebook and just chime in, we'll create a thing for this, and you can comment, I guess, on my bad Venn diagram of what are your most popular titles in your Steam library, or what games do you spend the most time on?
I think one thing I want to point out is I have many more games than you do, but you obviously have a lot more Yeah, I'm much broader and you're much deeper. Like you spend a lot more time in the games that you've played in your library, whereas I have a ton of games and I've kind of dabbled in all of them.
Hmm.
And whenever I see something that's really interesting or has a weird new type of gimmick, I always want to try it out. Like, for example, Captain Forever. It's called Captain Forever Remix. I don't know why it's a remix, but that game is pretty bad, but it has a very interesting premise and interesting game design and mechanics. And I played it
You just
for,
wanted to see what it was all about.
yeah, I played it. I saw a little video of it and I played it for 5 hours. Like I said, it's not the world's greatest game, but it is very interesting and very different from any other game you've ever played.
I wondered the same about On the Rain-Slick Precipice of Darkness.
That was the video games that Penny Arcade released.
Uh-huh.
And those are just like, I really like Penny Arcade as an online comic strip. If you haven't seen it, they talk about video games a lot. So they released 4 games. The first 2 are kind of like, basically it's one game split into 2 episodes. The third one and the 4th one are completely different. They're taking the same premise, kind of, and the same storyline, kind of, but they changed it to an entirely different like mechanic, how the game actually works and functions. So those were more just, I liked the source material, and they were very funny. That's all.
Okay. All right. Did you have any others you want to highlight? Because I don't have anything else to say about this.
A Kerbal Space Program is something that I'm keeping in my Steam library because that's how I'm going to teach my son advanced physics when he gets old enough to understand it.
Okay.
Yeah. If you've never seen or heard of Kerbal Space Program, I'd encourage you to go watch 5 minutes of YouTube on that. That is where, imagine if you, sir, were NASA in 1940 and you got handed a budget and said, here, go figure out how to go to space. And like you start from the ground up and you have like liquid fueled rockets or solid state rockets. You get to completely customize and build your spaceship from nothing. You have to figure out how all of the navigation works, how all of the and it's all real physics. Like you have to actually know how to enter a low Earth orbit and stay there, or else your rocket's just going to burn up and fall back to the planet.
Okay.
And then
You're attracted to these kind of games that have this real high bar of entry.
So this game does have a very high bar of entry. I think I got into it when a buddy of mine told me about it. And it's funny because my buddy, I played this game for 89 hours. And once I got it and I did a couple of things that I wanted to do, I sent a guy, one of my Kerbals, little like lemming type dudes that don't really do anything, but they're your astronauts. I got him into orbit around the moon, but I didn't have enough fuel to get him back.
Oh, no.
So he will forever they don't die. They just float in space forever. And so I could later send another spaceship to go get him, maybe, but I just didn't. I just wanted to get somebody in orbit to the moon. That was really difficult to do. But the guy who recommended it to me was so super hardcore into it. He actually had written and published several mods to the game. He was most proud of a mod that actually gave you access to a radar altimeter in the game that he wrote and that people used.
Huh. So I'm sensing here that games kind of play a different function for you than they do for me. Like for you, you're looking for a challenge. So you want something that's unique, something that requires you to kind of bring all of your abilities to bear on it. Your good memory, your math, your science, your calculation, those kinds of things. For me, I'm looking for something that has kind of a low bar of entry, stimulates me enough, but isn't super challenging. Like we have in both of our libraries, FTL, Faster and Light. I dropped that game like a hot potato.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's too hard. Great. It's too hard.
Too hard? It's like a board game.
Yeah, but it's a hard board game.
Well, that's what makes it feel so good when you actually triumph.
I get that, but I'm also like, this sucks. Like I'm tired of losing. I want my game to pander to me a bit more.
That's funny. There's a really funny video. There's one game, I don't remember which one it was. And on most games, they'll have like a difficulty selector screen, and then they'll have a little description of what it does. And there is one game, and it keeps coming up, and it's a meme on the internet. You can find it somewhere, I bet. And it says, like, you put it on super easy, and in the description of it, it says, like, I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. I just want to get off work, sit down, put my feet up, and feel like a GD superhero.
Right. I don't want guards who are 10 levels higher than me telling me I can't kill this shopkeep.
So I'm going to kind of expand a little bit on what you just said about me. You are right. Like the games that I get really into, like the games that I have the most time in, are the ones that tick enough boxes for me that I'll get into it, and then they do have depth and they do have complexity and they do challenge me, and I feel good for playing them. But in video games in general, I see them more as an artistic expression, because video games can do things that no other form of media can do because it's inherently interactive. And so the way that the game designers build in the way that you interact with their story or their message or whatever it is that they're trying to convey to you, I find that interesting in different people's perspectives and takes on how they actually implement that.
So if there were a single genre that, of the game genres, what would you say you spent the most time on? What genre in your lifetime?
Oh, hands down, easily, that's RPGs. I want to be a character. I want to be able to make decisions. I want to be a part of an epic storyline, and I want to feel like I'm contributing to it and changing it in a way that matters. Which is why, hands down, flat out, my favorite video game series of all time has been and will continue to be Mass Effect.
Okay.
Because that had a huge, enormous story that was going on. You were an influential character. It's a sci-fi RPG, yeah. It's an action RPG, so there's a lot of third-person shooter elements to it. There's a lot of combat to it, but there's a ton of story elements and decisions. And what I really like, that game is broken up into 3 main parts, Mass Effects 1, 2, and 3, obviously. But if you have all 3 of them on the same platform, you can play the game in the first game, Mass Effect 1, and you make decisions that alter the ending. It's one of those games that has multiple endings depending on the decisions that you made in the game. But then when you start Mass Effect 2, you have the option of importing your save file from Mass Effect 1, and all of the decisions that you made in the first game roll over into the second game. And then the same thing happens again going into the third game.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see how that all... The first game, you branch out and you can get wildly different endings depending on how you do it. And the second game, you can get... things can go really, really bad, and you can get very, very bad endings in that game. And then the third game, they have to take every possible scenario that could have happened through the first 2 games and branch them all down to a handful of different endings that make sense.
My gaming lifetime, it kind of would look like it transformed over time. As a child, I played a lot of platformers, just real low barrier of entry, just running and jumping from platform to platform. And
that's what existed.
And then I kind of liked role playing games, but it was like Final Fantasy 1 for the NES kind of role playing, and I spent a lot of time on that in my teenage years. But I don't have any patience for that anymore. But over time, my number one thing I played the most from the very beginning until now is turn-based strategy, and particularly the Civilization series. But I still play a lot of puzzlers. But I don't play any first-person shooters. I don't play any role-playing games anymore.
So then you like games where you get to sit and think and come up with a strategy and make decisions before having to actually implement it. You don't want to have to do it in the moment. You want to have time to sit and think and then implement.
Yeah, that's a turn-based strategy, but then a puzzler, you are making up the strategy in the moment.
Well, I was thinking more about Magic the Gathering too, because that's got to be your number one game that you play, right?
Yeah. There's another type that I think we can delve on later, but I need to think through how I want to talk about it. Should we talk about life for a while?
No, I'm not done with games yet, because I kind of shamed you for saying that you had 1,500 hours in
Civ 5.
Civ 5. To make you feel a little bit better, I used to play. I was hardcore. What are you laughing at already?
We're going to World of Warcraft.
I'm going into World of Warcraft, yes, because for a large portion of my life, I was very, very much sucked into World of Warcraft. I don't know. I was my junior year in college when it came out, and I was in I was in a bad place emotionally, and it came out, and it was this perfect escape. I would just completely forget about everything that was going on and just pour myself into this MMORPG. And then the fact that I was playing with a bunch of my friends and that we had these shared experiences that we could talk about later on and afterwards. And then I graduated and got into the real military and then continued playing with all these people. So I had all these great experiences, but it doesn't matter. I had played that for 4 or 5 years, I think. And then my parents asked me one time when they saw me, and I had been in the military for 2 or 3 years, you're still playing that? Oh yeah, we're still doing it and it's still fun. How long have you played that? And I go, well, shoot, I don't know. Let me find out. And there's this fun little command that you could do in the game where you type a command and it would tell you play hours. It would tell you exactly how much you played on that account. And Okay, so I can't even emphasize this enough. That was probably 2008 or 2009 when I actually looked at the stat. And at that time, I had 186 days played. Like 186
That's just
24-hour days.
okay.
You're doing the math?
Yeah, that's 4,500 hours.
At that time. Now, after that, I played consistently for another 2 or 3 years. And then I quit for a while, and then I got into it for a while, then I quit for a while. And then now with COVID-19, I don't know how this happened, but I think my son wanted to play it one time or something. I don't remember. But it went from like, oh yeah, I mean, we still have like the starter account or whatever. That's free. You can play a character up to level 20 or something. So download it, install, let Carter tool around and play with it for a while. That was at the beginning of the lockdown, the COVID lockdown. Now here we are 2 months later, and both my wife and I have reactivated our accounts, and we have, I think our highest level characters are level 100, but we only play them together. Like neither one of us goes and does it by ourselves. I have done for maybe an hour or two by myself on something else, but we're not talking about that. But my son and my wife will play, or me and my son will play. He has his characters. He keeps making new ones. And then we have characters that line up with his that play next to him. And then my wife and I will play sometimes. But that's the only time I play it. It's not really fun or engaging to play it by myself, but it is fun to play with another person that's like in the game right next to you. And then we go through all this stuff together.
Okay. I am proposing this for the future show where I actually interview you about this, like I did about your time at the academy, because I'm so fascinated with this whole thing, and you and I have talked about it in the past, but like it's kind of alien to me, and I've never really participated in it. But there's a whole culture and lifestyle and set of vocabulary and everything that goes along with all of that you've done, probably nearing 10,000 hours. Which makes you an expert. So maybe I'll interview you as a World of Warcraft expert at one of these points. I think it'll be interesting.
Well, let's not do that, because I want to maintain some semblance of respect for myself, and I want listeners to think that I'm a person and not one of those nerds.
I think we need to use our podcast platform in a progressive way, and we need to bring this out of being a shameful thing.
Well, it's not a shameful thing. I'm not saying it's a shameful thing. I'm just saying I'm ashamed of it sometimes. That's all. No, and yeah, all right. We'll put that on one of the list of stuff we can talk about some other day.
Let's talk about life for a while.
Let's talk about life. Now, I want to rant a little bit about daylight savings time again.
Can you? I think you should.
I could rant about daylight savings time for a long time. Which is weird, because I'm in a state that doesn't have daylight savings time, so I shouldn't be able to or have anything to rant about.
Yeah, listeners, if you didn't know, I think is Arizona the only state in the union that officially just does not participate in daylight savings time. I think Ohio just did this, or Wisconsin or something.
I think Arizona and Hawaii are the only two that I'm aware of that don't do daylight savings time. But for those of you who aren't aware, daylight savings time is this psycho practice where, for some weird reason, the entire world agreed on certain days to change the time on their clocks because reasons. And it's different for different countries and different regions. Some people do it on this day, some people do it on the other day. But then at the end, 6 months later, we all just change the clocks back to what they were in the first place. Like, the whole practice doesn't make any sense in a society that has electric lights.
Nope, it's just Arizona and Hawaii.
Well, there you go. This needs to be a federal thing. We just need to get rid of daylight savings time, because, like, this didn't affect me. This affected my wife.
Okay, so what happened?
So I was just hunky-dory doing my normal routine thing. Nicole had 3 separate appointments this week, where either she had meetings on the phone or she had to like physically go to a place. She recently signed up for like some farming co-op where they like take all these vegetables in like a giant tote or whatever, and then they just throw it in your car as you drive by.
Wow.
Well, yeah, it's socially distanced. It's very cheap, locally sourced produce, and like we just got a ton of fruits and vegetables for a fraction of the price we get at the grocery store.
What fruits and vegetables grow in Arizona?
I don't know if they're imported or what, but we,
Locally sourced.
well, she got like, and she kept asking me while she was ordering this stuff. It's like, how much is 7 pounds of apples? I'm like, 7 pounds of apples is a lot. Why? What are they asking for? It's like $3. I'm like, yes, buy 7 pounds of apples for $3.
Okay.
And like, she got like, how much is, I don't remember, but she said like, this seems like a lot of pinto beans. I'm like, well, we like beans. And then she brought it in. It's like just a can. It looks like a 2-gallon
Number
pink
10
can of pinto beans. We're not sure what we're going to do with those yet.
can.
But
Okay.
part of this process is that they scheduled her through this online system. They say, all right, it runs like clockwork because it's socially distanced and all of this stuff that's going on. You've got to be here inside this window to get your order because you're going to drive in, we're going to load your car, and you're going to get out of the way because we have limited space for people to actually come in and do this. And they sent her a time, and it's like, oh, it is going. You need to be here at 1:30 Mountain Daylight Time on the button.
Wait. If this is locally sourced, why would they not just give it to it? Why?
Why even? Well, this is the thing. It just said like the system automatic general email was 1:30 p.m. MDT.
Oh, okay. So it was computer generated.
Right, but this is the thing. Because they put the 3 letters at the end, MDT, well, hang on. What does that mean? Like, is it daylight time now? Like, is it savings time now? I don't even know. We don't know, Ben, because we don't do mountain or daylight savings time. We thought we were just, like, the closest I've ever gotten, I thought we were just MST all the time. I thought that's what we were. But apparently we're not. Apparently it changes to MDT, but the time doesn't change, but the 3 letters change. I'm still not clear on how this works. But the point of this
I hope
was...
you're not asking for me to explain it to you because I can't.
Well, this is the thing. Like, she had 3 appointments this week, and all 3 of the appointments, like, either they were conference calls with people that were out of state, or they were driving down to this to a parking lot to get produce. And all 3 of the appointments put the daylight, the MDT or the MST after it. And both of us, it took both of our combined brain power to be like, well, wait a minute, what time are they actually talking about? And she was 1 for 3. The only one that she got right was the local produce one, because we assumed that, like, okay, so this is probably a computer thing, so they probably just mean 1:30. And so she went down there at 1:30, and lo and behold, that was the correct time. The other 2, she ended up like waiting an hour. Like, she tried to do everything.
So she was an hour early both times?
Yes.
Okay.
Because, which is not a bad thing to be, I guess, except except that now you look like an idiot to whoever you're trying to like meet with or whatever. Like, why can't you figure out what time this meeting was supposed to be? I don't know. Why can't your state be logical and not change its freaking clocks every 6 months?
Are you guys going to move?
Why would we move? No, I'm not moving. No, we're not moving.
Okay.
We're just having randomly, part of her work, she had to call people from out of state, or people from out of state had to call her, and she had to be available. One of them was for her work. Another one was for school, I think. Like, she just started her doctorate program.
Okay, these weren't like job interviews or something like that.
No, it's just random stuff that happened.
Okay, I was just trying to figure. My brain was like, are they doing job interviews in another state?
No, but if I get a job interview in another state, I will definitely let you know.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to bad at English.
Somehow. Always.
Yeah.
The transitions.
I'll make a connection. So there was a phrase that the British used so ubiquitously that for a minute I had to figure out what they were meant for it because they use it all the time. The phrase is "can't be bothered," can't be bothered, and when they say "can't be bothered," usually it's in the context of talking about yourself, and it means I don't want to do that. Like,
okay,
well, my wife wanted me to move the lawn, but I can't be bothered, which means I don't want to mow the lawn.
I can't be bothered. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I Googled this, it was funny because a lot of the Google searches I found for this were British people saying, what do Americans say instead of can't be bothered? Like, they were trying to figure out what we say that means the same thing because they use it so much. And so I saw some Americans trying to explain it as saying, like, I didn't feel like it. Or maybe you could use the phrase that Americans say a lot, I couldn't care less.
Which is wrong. Like, I hate it when people say that. Couldn't care less. Or no, wait a minute.
Yeah, I said it correctly.
I screwed it. Yeah, you did say it right. Dang it. Yeah. People always say could care less, which is wrong. Yeah. That means you do care just a little.
Yeah. So the example that I found, that you gave a minute ago about daylight savings time, like I could probably figure out what CDT and MST and MDT means, but I can't be bothered.
Can't be bothered. Well, you can't say it that way either. You have to say it like the way that you said it. Can't be bothered. Say it again.
Can't be bothered. So
can't be bothered.
Can't be bothered.
Can't be bothered.
There was
I can't say it without feeling a little more sophisticated, a little more civilized.
There was another way that they used it when they would talk about someone else, and it was very derogatory in nature. Like if you said, I don't know, let's say like we had a farewell for someone where everyone went out to a local pub and we were having drinks to remember so-and-so before they left, and somebody would go, well, where's Mark? Oh, he can't be bothered. Which means like he didn't want to come.
Ben, we do that all the time in English. It's just, he doesn't give a, and then there's an expletive word for crap.
Yes, exactly.
He doesn't give a crap.
But sometimes it was also told in the context of like work, like where you're judging someone else's intent. And it feels like that. Like you're judging whether or not they care about whatever the task is you're doing. You would say, why didn't so-and-so contribute to this project? Can't be bothered.
Did that happen a lot? Like, are the British just way more like up in each other's faces about what they do?
I wouldn't say that. But when I think about this phrase, it brings to mind those kinds of memories, those experiences where you're judging someone else's intent. You're either expressing your own intent or judging someone else's intent. And that brings me to a topic I wanted to talk to you about. I kind of put some notes in on this.
Hey, whoa. Hang on. Like I had a note that I made mentally during this whole talk that we're having about can't be bothered. And I have to bring this out. It has no bearing on the conversation whatsoever, but I mean, I got to say it.
All right. Let's take
it. And that is like, so yeah, total tangent. But whenever you say stuff in your British accent, your posh British accent, which is great, by the way, and I love it to death. Like for some reason, like I can't not picture you with a big bushy mustache that's slightly curled at the edges. Like, I don't know why, but just that's the image of you that pops into my head. That's the British version of Ben that I'm thinking of.
All right, I'll do a graphic of that and put it on the Facebook. On episode 1, you and I talked about in psychology. There, in the mid '80s, they developed a theory that they called the Big Five personality traits, or there's lots of different names for them. The 5-factor model. There's a mnemonic that they use to remember it. Ocean. It's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And these are all...
I only have the end part of that.
A spectrum with a duality to them where, on one end of the spectrum, you're very open, and on the other end of the spectrum, you're not at all open. Same with conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. On our pilot episode of Bad at Magic, you and I talked about agreeableness and how, at one end of the scale, you're completely agreeable, and at the other end of the scale, you're not at all agreeable. The terms they use are friendly and compassionate versus challenging and detached. But we also talked about how it isn't necessarily positive in one direction or the other. Like somebody that's completely agreeable could also be a victim because they don't ever say no to anything and they always just go along with everything.
Right. This is just a fact if you are open or if you're challenging. It's not good or bad. It's just this is how you are.
Right, and this is one factor of your personality. So psychologists have kind of agreed that most things about people's personalities can fall into this spectrum of OCEAN, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you make them broad enough, you can fit anything in anything.
Yeah, well, they have some measures, some very professional exams that they take where they ask you a bunch of questions and you give yourself a self-assessment. They also have ones that other people could do, like your friends and family or a doctor could do, and it measures. And they have, if you take a particular psychological condition, like this person has this mental illness, it has a pattern that it shows up as on this scale.
We've talked about this before, and you lose me real quick when we start talking about putting people and especially their personality traits and their consciousness into trying to categorize them into these boxes. Like, because it feels like any box that you put somebody in is going to lose the granularity. You're going to lose the full picture of who they are by trying to categorize them or put them into these pigeonholes. You're going to lose the detail.
I don't know if you've ever taken one of these quizzes, but at the end it gives you like this spiderweb looking thing that has 5 points on it, and then each point on it goes out or in depending on what score you got in that area.
So I had to take a psychological aptitude battery or whatever they called it for the Air Force when I transitioned to being a drone pilot.
Really?
Yes. And
Did they tell you why?
to make sure that we weren't psychos, I think is what the thing was. Like they were going to give us access to, live munitions. They didn't want us to go off the rails in the middle of a mission.
What kind of questions were on it?
So like we had to go TDY for like 3 days to just take physical tests for those 3 straight days. And it was grueling. But the personality test was the craziest thing that I've ever done. And I don't know if it fits into this category or whatever, but it was like 500 questions, all true, false. And they were statements that were like just the weirdest stuff. Like, I believe ghosts can influence people for good or for bad. True or false? And
Wow.
and they would have like 6 or 7. I remember specifically every subject had multiple questions that were worded slightly differently, spread out throughout the entire thing. Because then later it's like, I believe that ghosts can influence people. True or false? But then the other one was different because like for good or for bad. And like it was just craziness. But we got
Were
out
they
of it.
trying to discern if you believed in ghosts?
That was like, like 6 or 7 of the 8 or the 500 questions was about these ghosts, right?
Uh-huh.
And so like we walked out of that test because it took like 3 hours and we were just done. Like what was the point of that? Like I don't know. But then the next day we had one-on-one interviews with an Air Force psychologist, and he sat me down and he's like, okay, based on your test results, and he said like 2 sentences that was like my entire personality in a nutshell.
Huh.
And I was like, wow, that test must have been really freaking accurate.
So
Somehow.
that's what I'm talking about here, because I know you resist the idea that you can somehow capture someone like that, but you kind of can, especially when it's a self-assessment. If you're being honest about what you think when you answer these questions, it's going to capture your personality.
I'm a snowflake, Ben. Don't you
I'm
dare
unique,
tell me I'm not a snowflake.
just like
That's
everyone
right.
else.
I'm special.
Okay, well, the first time we talked about this, we talked about agreeableness, and I think you and I both kind of score high in the disagreeableness category. Where I'm willing to stand up to my boss when he's trying to get everyone to give him the yes man answer on whether or not we should cancel the 50th anniversary celebration. And, you're willing to basically tell the fast food employee, no, I'm not going to pull my car forward when my order is going to take a long time.
I think that's different, though. In that scenario,
and some of these are circumstantial.
This one is circumstantial because you just have a problem, like, reading the room. Like, you're just a very honest person.
Maybe.
To give your opinion. The difference with me is I read the room and, like, deliberately make the decision that's going to make people mad in the first place.
But you could probably find scenarios where, even though maybe you score higher in general on agreeableness than me, or disagreeableness than me, that if we were both in the same situation, depending on the situation, maybe I would be the one to be disagreeable versus you.
I agree with that. I think we've been in a very few handful of situations where you were more disagreeable than I was.
Yeah, that's definitely occurs. But we've already talked about agreeableness. So what I want to talk about this time, that's one of the 5. Maybe we'll fill out the whole wheel of 5 and talk about the other ones. But today I want to talk about conscientiousness. So from the Wikipedia article, conscientiousness, conscientious individuals are generally hardworking and reliable. They are also likely to be conformists. When taken to an extreme, they may also be workaholics, perfectionists, and compulsive in their behavior. People who score low on conscientiousness tend to be laid back, less goal-oriented, and less driven by success. So, that's conscientiousness in a nutshell. And obviously, at both extremes, you have problems. At the highest degree of conscientiousness, you have somebody that's like OCD. And at the lowest degree, you have somebody that's like sociopathic or the Big Lebowski, whatever, just not very conscientious.
Oh, you can't put it that way because everybody wants to be the dude from the Big Lebowski.
The dude abides.
The dude abides.
So farther down in the article, there's a section about the workplace, and this is what I'm driving at. What does this look like in the workplace? And I've been thinking about what happens in the Air Force, because some of these attributes, I think there's this fallacy that we need one kind of person. That's what we're looking for. You have an ideal soldier or manager or leader or whatever, and you want everyone to be like that. And so the way that you develop people, it's like you're trying to get them to conform to be like that. And I tend to resist that idea in general.
I think everybody wants that. I think every manager wants to be able to reach inside the heads of every person below them and like tweak their personality to be just so. And that way they mesh and conform to what that manager's expectations are. And then when they leave and a new manager comes in, he'll tweak them all a different way.
There's a positive trend in management where we talk about diversity. And I think this is part of diversity. There isn't just diversity of the color of your skin or the lineage of your parenthood, but also diversity of the type of personality that you have based on these traits. And if you had everyone that was all one type of personality, even if their skin was all different color, that's not diversity. You only have one view when you're examining a problem. You only have one approach when you're trying to carry out the actions. But if you have diversity of personality, then you have people looking at things from different angles, trying new things, those kinds of things that can lead to innovation and positive outcomes.
Yeah, but in an organization like the military, diversity is less accepted than conformity. Because in the military, the guy at the top just wants people below him to do what he thinks they're supposed to be doing. Like, you do this. And a lot of times the problem is the manager will go, do this in this way, and expect that's what they want to happen. They maybe if you have inputs or whatever, but all of that fades in the background of just do the mission that I gave you. And everything else just kind of doesn't matter.
You would think so, but it doesn't always work that way. They say that's what they want, but they don't actually want that. And I've seen that over and over. I remember when I went to basic training for officers, which was 12 weeks long at the time, and half of my class was prior service enlisted guys who had already gone through the regular basic training that's designed for 18-year-olds just fresh out of high school. And they weren't prepared for the differences between those two courses. And I remember my roommate, who was a master sergeant at the time, an E7, so he'd been in for 15 years, and then he switched over to be an officer. And he went to officer basic training, and I think he expected, and many of the enlisted guys did, that it was just going to be a repeat of what they'd gone through already. They're like, I got this. I know what this is like. You just got to make your bed real neat. You march. I already know how to march. I know how to make my bed. This is going to be easy.
I love how your voice changes
is not
when you do these characters. But yes.
That was not what it was like at all. They thought it was just they had identified and structured basic training for officers to be completely different than it was for enlisted troops. They do want enlisted troops to conform and do what they're told. Officers, they do not. They want them to understand the reasoning behind a task. They want them to innovate. They want them to take initiative. They want them to, to do things. So an enlisted guy that was just trying to do the basic training thing of do exactly what you're told and don't stand out and don't do anything is going to be getting yelled at. And they're confused. They're like, why am I getting yelled at? I'm doing everything they told me to do.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, that was very different from my experience in my leadership training, which was the 4 years of the Air Force Academy, which was the same kind of end state where we want you to innovate, we want you to have initiative, we want you to get out there and lead your peers and do all these great things. The difference was they didn't tell us where the boundaries were, and you got slapped down hard if you put one toe over any of those boundaries.
Yeah. And there were definitely boundaries. I mean, we were still getting jacked up if our bed wasn't made nice or, we didn't have all the buttons done up on our shirts on the hangers in our closet. But let me...
You didn't know the trick. You just get one perfect set of clothes, and then all the other clothes live in your laundry bag, and you iron them as needed.
No. It was way more structured than you think. When they took us shopping, they told us how many to buy, and then the inspection was done on all of them. So if they said you have to buy 5 shirts, then they counted 5 shirts when they did the inspection.
Well, they weren't inspecting; they were taking inventory. That's totally different.
All right, let me read you the section from the Wikipedia article on conscientiousness about in the workplace.
We went far afield on that one. Yes, please do.
Conscientious employees are generally more reliable, more motivated, and harder working. They also have lower rates of absenteeism and counterproductive work behaviors such as stealing and fighting with other employees. Lower rates of those things. So far this sounds like the model employee, what every employer wants, a conscientious employee.
Yes, I want to be a conscientious employee reading this.
Furthermore, conscientiousness is the only personality trait that correlates with performance across all categories of jobs. However, agreeableness and emotional stability may also be important, particularly in jobs that involve a significant amount of social interaction.
I feel like emotional stability should be highly desired for most jobs.
Yeah. Of all manager-leader types, top executives show the lowest level of rule following, a conscientious trait. So it's interesting that at the very top, CEOs and those kind of people are low conscientious workers.
This is another problem I take with like all of these personality battery things and all the leadership books that you read, and like they always take these like these total ridiculous outliers, the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezos, the Bill Gates of the world, and they say, oh, well, these are the traits that make them this way. And the problem is when you pull it apart, they're probably really terrible employees and would never have gotten to the position that they were in if they had ever worked a normal job.
Yeah.
Like just, there's so many.
Okay. I want to put in our queue a book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers, and it's about success at that level. We can do a review of that at some point.
I think we've both read Outliers.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll reread it, but I would like to do a book review of that book. That's interesting. When did you read it?
I read it a couple years ago when I was cleaning pools.
Huh. Okay. Maybe I recommended it to you.
You might have recommended it to me. It's, it conformed with what my expectation was. There's a bell curve, and everybody fits somewhere on the bell curve.
Right. Here's the last part of that section. Being too conscientiousness is not always positively related to job performance. Sometimes the opposite is true. Being too conscientious could lead to taking too much time, to making urgent decisions, and working too attached to the rules and lack innovation. So this reminds me of an experience I had with my NCOs in Italy. So we were in charge of custody of nuclear weapons, which requires a high degree of conscientiousness, but there was different levels of that. My guys did the maintenance of the monitoring systems that tracked the status of the nuclear weapons 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they always required two-person integrity, which meant that there had to be two people watching the security system at all times. So we had two separate guard shacks with a cop sitting in front of it watching their console 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as long as both cops could hit the green button and say that they verified that all the weapons are down, locked, and secure, then it's considered true. So that if one guy was, lying or fudging it, another guy would know, and the system would be triggered. Well, the cops had to be very rigid. They had to be very conscientious and conforming in their execution of their rules and checklists. But the systems behind the scenes that my comm guys used were sometimes commercial off the shelf of recent vintage, those kinds of things. And sometimes there wasn't a big, long checklist that had been refined over a period of 50 years for them to follow. And so the cops were taught, never deviate from your checklist, do everything exactly as it says in the book, no matter what, at all times. And that's the only way to be safe, and the only way to be secure, and the only way to not get in trouble. And they did. And my guys were like, hey, you got to get this thing working, and if that means, you need to use some bubble gum and baling wire and duct tape, then get her done.
It's very much ends justify the means type of environment for them.
And so it would create friction between these two jobs, where the cops were trying to run a checklist, and my guys were just trying to get it working. And they just bump heads because of these two jobs demanded a different level of conscientiousness, or it applied in different ways.
Interesting. I had that same experience when I transitioned from being a comm officer to being a pilot for drones. Because as the comm officer, I remember my first day on the job, they gave, all right, here is your shop. You have 8 troops. Here is your mission. Make it happen. And it's very much, you have to figure out how to lead and manage these people to achieve your objectives. And that was from day one. And I spent years and years doing that with only increasing levels of responsibility as I got older.
Yeah.
Then I transitioned as a captain into a flying squadron, and the majors and lieutenant colonels, they did not care what my opinion was, not one iota. As a company grade officer in a flying squadron, you run your checklist, you do exactly what you're told, and you stay inside your boundaries, and you don't do anything else. And
so it's like you got sent back to basic training.
Yes, it was very constricting, and I had trouble with that, making that transition.
Yeah. Well, so after I read the article and kind of, just familiarized myself with the idea in psychology, there's an aspect of it that they didn't really delve into that I want to talk about. And that's something, so there's an action that people do in the military. I don't know if they use this term in the private sector, that they call pinging. Pinging is supposed to be a metaphor to a submarine. A submarine can go around under the ocean and it can't see anything, so the way it knows where things are is sonar. And it can listen for noise that's coming in, but it can also actively send out noise that bounces off of things and sends back information. And it's a good metaphor for what's taking place. As a leader, sometimes you can act like a submarine where you can just listen and hear what's going on and try to make a decision about how to steer. Or you can send out information. You can ping. And so we use this term kind of ambiguously, but it generally means the same kind of thing in the military, that you are sending out an active, an action to try to spur or determine what's going on.
That could be anything from walking up to your subordinate's desk and be like, hey, how's this going? What's happening?
Yes. But this follows the spectrum of conscientiousness. So at the highest end of the conscientiousness spectrum, if you had someone that was pinging, they would be doing it constantly. They would have stand up in the morning. They would have an afternoon walk around. They would send you meetings during the day. They might have some type of task management system where they're required to provide you daily reports, a weekly activity report, a monthly summary, a quarterly summary, phone calls, email receipts, and on and on and on and on. If you want to be the kind of submarine that's walking around actively pinging all the time, you can do it.
Well, what's funny is in this metaphor is that submarines don't like to actively ping because when they ping, they also reveal their own position, which means that they're more likely to get shot and blown up. Just like the manager walking around pinging all their subordinates all the time is more likely to get punched in the face or yelled at.
Okay, so you're talking about the opportunity cost of this. And to someone who is high conscientiousness and they operate in a very ping-oriented way, they just consider more pinging better management. Like the more ways in which I am actively pinging my people, the better manager I am.
And that's just wrong. Yeah.
So talk about it from your perspective. What do you think the opportunity cost of being too pingy is, besides, like you said, people wanting to punch you in the face?
Well, like this is, it sounds like just from your description, it goes hand in hand with kind of micromanaging. Like the more you're actively like involved in the process of what your subordinates are doing, there's two things. One, like the micromanaging aspect where they feel like you're just telling them what to do, not letting them actually do it. Who was that? Patton. Patton said, don't ever tell somebody how to do something. Tell them what to do and then let them surprise you with their initiative or their creativity.
So Patton understood this, that there was an opportunity cost to this type of management.
Well, the other thing is, too, is
quashing innovation.
Yeah. Not just the quashing of innovation, but then the trust aspect. Like if I'm getting pinged constantly about a project, like there's a point where okay, yeah, he's pinging me a lot because this is important. And then there's another point where it's like, okay, he flat doesn't trust me to do this at all. And so now I don't even want to do the project anymore. Like I am less into this project because, well, he's just going to do the whole thing through me anyway. I don't even know why I'm here. So I have less buy-in. I have less initiative. I have less vested into this project in the first place. So you're demotivating your subordinates after a certain point.
Yes. Now, someone who does that doesn't look at it that way. They don't see it that way. And I've been...
Of course they don't see it that way, because if they saw it that way, they wouldn't do it.
Right. So there were two people this week in my life, one at work and one in my volunteer capacity at church, that are both very high on the conscientiousness scale, that were having problems with me because I'm lower than they are. And I realized that frequently when someone does this kind of subconscious or semi-conscious evaluation of another person's personality, this is definitely one area where it creates friction. If I am a high conscientious person and I evaluate you as lower than me, significantly maybe, then I see you as a problem. And I'll give you some vignettes that kind of illustrate this. So let's say, for instance, I have an important meeting. So I tell you about the meeting. Then I send you a meeting invite, maybe with a read receipt attached so that I know that you read it. Then I can see that you added it to your calendar. Then maybe I call and give you a reminder. And then maybe I'm sitting in the conference room for the meeting 15 minutes early because that's the kind of thing I do. And it's 10 minutes early and you're still not there and I'm looking up your phone number to call you. And it's 5 minutes there and I'm sending a runner for you. Even if you walk in the door before the start of the meeting, I may already have evaluated you as completely apathetic towards whatever it was that the meeting was for. And from your perspective, you got to the meeting on time and maybe one notification was enough.
Right. But yes, you're hitting so many like PTSD type moments in my brain of dealing with people this way. You're exactly right. Like, you can, even if you are a conscientious person, if you're less conscientious than the person that's supervising you, you can be seen as defective or like
Right.
not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's a huge problem in like every organization, is the fact that when people get promoted, that can be negative reinforcement for all of their habit patterns. Like I had a boss once that he worked like 16-hour days, and that's just what he did. Like, oh, I've just got to get the mission done. And he did a bunch of stuff that was ancillary and completely unnecessary. He never optimized or made any efficiency improvements to any of his processes. He just powered through with all of these really bad ways of doing business, and it took him 16 hours a day, and so he worked 16 hours a day. But the military kept promoting him, and so when he got to the level that he was at,
it was reinforcement.
Exactly. He's like, well, this is what you have to do to get to the level that I'm at. And so he expected all of his subordinates to be putting in that same level of effort. And when I just worked my normal 8-hour workday, putting in 60% and getting more done than any of my peers, like he saw that as a huge problem. It's like, well, why aren't you here more? It's like, because, sir, I got all of my work done and the extra stuff that you asked me to do. Yeah, but you need to be here 16 hours a day. And do what? Drum on my desk? And this was the conflict that I had with that guy.
Wow. Yeah. So one of the conflicts I've been having this week with the in the volunteer capacity, there is an individual that I have to interact with frequently who doesn't have any authority or power over me, but we have to interact on a functional level. Like, he's passing me information that I'm supposed to pass on. He has a different group of people he's responsible for than me, and he always approaches it in a way where he thinks like I'm not going to do it. And if something ever happens that reinforces his idea that I don't take it seriously, he gets really alarmed about it. So I got this text from him the day before yesterday. He was like, call me right now. I was like, okay.
First of all, what's this guy's name? You're not going to say his name. Let's call him Dave.
Yeah.
First of all, I need to give him a proper noun. First of all, Dave, don't ever text me with direct instructions ever again. I will burn your house down. Second, you need to chill out. Like, you need to text me the question, and I will determine if this warrants a phone call.
Yeah. So he didn't. And I was giving him the benefit of the doubt because I don't have any way to judge like if he really did have something super important. So
because you're Ben Rich. That's what you do.
I call him up. Well, but I am a little... this guy really gets my goose, Josh. Really gets my goose. Because... okay, so I call him up, and he's like, I talked to so-and-so, and they didn't have that information I sent to you that I said to send to them. I'm like, who is that you're talking about? And I'm trying to think of how much detail to go in on this. It's not the sensitivity of it. It's just complex. There was a training session that was happening today. He sent out information to the units, and then the units were supposed to send it out to the auxiliaries, and it was supposed to filter down. But he lost visibility of it when he sent it over. And then someone way down low called him about it because they thought he might know about it and said they didn't know about it. And so he's assuming it broke down and I'm to blame.
So he assumed like the second that it left his hands, it all fell apart.
Yes, exactly. And the second it left its hands was when it went to me.
Now, you see, the confrontational person that I am, I immediately want to start pushing back and put this guy back in his place and put him back in that place so hard that he never leaves that place again. But that's not going to facilitate the relationship. Exactly.
No, so and I got to work on the relationship.
Well, and I am super interested in how Ben Rich would handle this situation, because this is like, we can abstract this. This is a very common circumstance that happens to everybody. Listeners, This is the advice that Ben Rich has to do.
All right, so this was all happening because, one, I am conscientious, and I do think it's important, and I think that it goes to the people that need to, but I also have to facilitate the relationship with this guy. I can't just run roughshod over him because he's pissing me off, which he was. And that was part of the emotion I was going through. But this is also church, and we're talking about being Christ-like, and I'm supposed to be living these values that I'm talking about. So I can't just be like, listen here, buddy, and tell him what I really think. He also works on the base in the military for general officers, and he takes that same level of operation that he does on the base for the generals and does it in his church service.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. So get ready, because I'm going to start casting some stones.
So the reason I had not done what he thinks he would have done were he in my situation is because when that information came out, I sent it to my executive, and my executive sent it out to all of his middle managers, and then with the instructions for them to send it out as they saw fit to their subordinates, and the person he talked to was one of them. So if I had at that point sent it out to everyone, I would have been stepping on the toes of my executive that I work for. I don't work for him, I work for my executive. So I forwarded him this message that basically was from my executive to his middle managers saying, here, giving the instructions.
Just here is the proof that I did my job. Please don't text me at home.
Right. Yeah. And then he just sent me a humble apology. But he's going to do it again next time because we interact in another capacity. I don't know if I've told you before, but I'm like the regional IT manager for 5 of the buildings here.
You tell me that all the time.
And he is one of my customers in that he works for the regional president of the church. And so whenever there's like a big meeting where there's a conference where we're doing like video webcast or need a projector set up or the AV systems or stuff like that.
This is the standard commander's exec calling the comm squadron to make sure the internet's running. It's like, yes, shut up, dude. I'm doing my job. Just chill out.
So I know how to do it. Like, I'm good at it. I've been doing it long enough. If they say this is what kind of meeting it's going to be, I know how many microphones I need to set up. I know how to plug up the AV system and everything. And I know how much time it takes. And I know that everything's working because I used it last time and I'm the one that put it away. So, I show up to the building 15 minutes beforehand, do it in 5 minutes, and I'm done with 10 minutes to spare. But without fail, if it's ever anything he's involved with, he is there before me and he's digging around in my stuff.
So I had, when I was a pool guy, this is a weird situation because I was a pool guy and I had customers that were like this. And it's an expectations management problem that you're experiencing. Like, you have to, it's like, well, I don't think this is all being done. It's like, all right, listen, you hired me because I'm the expert. The reason I'm doing this job is because I know more about it than you do. You need to, first of all, acknowledge that. And second of all, if you don't trust me, you need to fire me. Like that.
I need to have this talk with him. I don't think it would have the effect that I want. So did you have like one particular customer? Like, how often did you have to have this talk?
I had it 3 or 4 times.
Okay. And what percent is that? Is that like 1%?
That's probably, actually it's pretty close. That's 2 or 3%. I've had with people.
So, very low percent of people were like so high above you on the conscientiousness factor that it was causing this friction where they just really wanted to get involved, but they needed to defer to you.
And part of that was they didn't know what they were talking about, but they're the homeowner. So they're like,
right.
So they go out there and start messing with stuff. And it gets to the point where like, all right, this is the second time I've had to come to your house on a day that wasn't your normal day to fix something that you screwed up. So what did you learn? And he goes, well, I was just trying to do this. I'm like, you've tried to do this before, and this is the second time you've messed it up. And I've told you, like, just let me know, and I'll take care of it. Like, so it's a sliding scale of, hey, let's work this out as a relationship, all the way to one person. I told him, listen, we're gonna call him Bob. Bob, this is no longer your pool. This is my pool. If you want to swim, you text me first. Like, and he was fine with that. But
yeah.
It just goes back to one of those things. It's a real sticking point for me, and it hurts because I am very highly conscientious, right? I take pride in what I do, and I know I do everything that I do very well. And so it really gets emotional for me quickly when people start questioning my work. That guy, coming down and getting in your chili.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. The cost of that feeling like this person has given me a vote of no confidence. Like, I don't believe you can fix it, or I don't think you know what you're doing.
So you just have to have that conversation with them. Like, listen, I know that you are very, very good at what you do, and you are very thoughtful.
Conscientious.
And you're very conscientious. It's clear that you are. But you have to understand, like, when have I ever failed you? And this is the thing. This is what you fall back on.
I need to have that talk. I need to say that exact phrase you just said. When have I ever failed you?
You need to impart more trust in me than you are, because you're causing me problems. Like, I know you're not meaning to. I know you're a nice guy.
He knows that. I have this, 2 texts later, I have like this really ginger thing from him. My apologies. I was not trying to impose. It was an error or whatever. Like he knows that he irks me, but he can't stop himself.
It doesn't. No, but no. this is a level that you have to build into him. It's like the response to that text is like, oh, I'm super sorry about that. I didn't mean to, like, I know you're good and all that. It's like the follow-up text to that is, if you know all these things, then don't text me the first time.
I can't do that. It's like staying still in the drive-thru when they tell me to pull forward. I can't do it.
I had this problem actually at the work that I work at now, in the accounting firm that I'm in. It's a very small firm. There's only 5 people. And my boss, I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. I've said that before. But she is not used to working with people that are of... This makes me sound like such an elitist jerk. I'm not going to say that. Typically, the people that she works for are personal tax prep agents, which they have like maybe associate's degree or below. They're good, hardworking people. But like then, I don't know. I have a... how do I say I'm just better than these people without sounding like an ass, Ben?
I get it. This is a theme of your life.
But I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be more humble. I don't want to come across as like I'm being this like the big pompous, arrogant jerk that I've been in the past.
Yeah, you're smarter than the typical kind of people that she has hired to do this job.
I am,
and
smarter
she's
than
used
the
to
average
dealing
girl.
with them. So she's not thinking it through when she's talking to you sometimes.
Yes, and so there was some friction when after about 6 months, when I was getting the rhythm of things, I started figuring out what's going on and started, taking initiative like you're supposed to do. Like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to start just doing. Well, she's not used to having any kind of employee that makes that transition. And so she was still kind of really micromanaging some things that I had like well under control. And I had to have that talk with her. And I sat down with her. I'm like, listen, please tell me if I'm out of line, because I work for her. And I was very respectful of the relationship there. I feel like you're micromanaging me a little bit on specific things. I feel like I've got a handle on it, and I'm conscious. I understand that you need to have oversight of things, but we need to work out a better process to where you get the oversight that you feel like you need to make sure everything's flowing correctly. But at the same time, I feel like you're not in my office telling me what to do every 10 minutes. Like, I need you to tell me what to do, not how to do it. I'm smart enough to figure out the how. When you tell me the how, that makes me feel less valued as an employee.
How was that received?
That's actually received very well. We have a very good working relationship because we are very straight with each other. And it worked out very well. Like, she has since, like, now we have this great little interaction every once in a while where one of the problems is that she thinks by talking. She's going through her thought process out loud. And so she's talking about the steps that need to happen for certain things, even though I've already come up with all of those steps and I know what I'm going to do from point A to point B to get there. And so when I tell her, hey, this is the situation, this is what I'm going to do. And then she starts walking through all the steps. And now it's devolved to the point where I just smile at her with my smile. And she goes, no, I get it. I'm just talking out loud. I'm not telling you. I'm just working through it.
She can't help herself, but she recognizes when she's doing it.
Right. Which is fine. Like, if she recognizes that she's doing it and then like I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just working through the process for myself, then that takes all of it off of me. Like, okay, you're not up in my chili. You're just working through it. That's fine. I've already worked through it. You don't have to. You could just... I would like her to take that next step and just be like, just look at me like, you have it. I would say yes, and then she would leave me alone. But it's not going to get there, and that's fine.
So the church service one is really irking me. It doesn't come up a lot. It just comes up from time to time, and it's been less recently. And so I kind of just have this hope that just every time it comes up that maybe that'll just be the last time, and then we won't have this problem anymore. But it keeps coming up from time to time. So maybe we need to have a talk with him. But I also had an experience with this week in a professional way. I have a leader that's not in my direct chain of command, but it's in my funding chain of command. So he has a lot of influence over my day-to-day job, even though he doesn't write my performance reports. So, I almost interact with him more than I do my actual boss, just because of functionally where he is. He controls my money.
That's interesting. I write your checks, but that's weird.
Yeah. I'd explain more, but that's enough information. Anyway, he is definitely he's high conscientiousness, and he's definitely from the school of thought of more management is better management.
Ugh.
So
that's how I feel about that.
We're in this agile delivery model for providing software that does this back-end stuff for logistics database, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're having a problem where it takes 10 weeks to deliver a new software package and 15 weeks to field it. So what's happening is every cycle we go through, we're falling half a cycle behind on delivering the last one.
I'm just getting it installed and working before you send out the next one.
Right. So now we're like 3 cycles behind. So
whoa! How did you get 3 cycles behind before somebody like, hey boss, we're having problems?
Yeah, that's what's happening right now. So they come down and he's like, all right, show me everything you do for like in this testing and fielding cycle, and I'm going to scrutinize every little bit, and we're going to wring out this 50% improvement. Now let me tell you, that's not possible.
It's just, that's when you just got to look at me like, we're going to call him Jim. Jim? No.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by.
But he's a GS-15. He's a colonel equivalent civilian with a lot of power and authority, and I don't have the ability to say no to him wanting to do this. However, he was doing it as a preparation to brief his boss on it, who I know and have a little bit of faith in.
But you're not in his chain. Like, how does he have any control over this? How does he have any say in this? How can he even have to brief his leadership on this if he's?
It's the money thing. It's the money thing.
Oh my goodness.
So we briefed to him our process, and he's doing his thing. His micromanagement thing. Well, what about this? And then they do like, if you don't know an answer, then he asks a million questions about the thing. And he's like, well, why is this taking so long? Who's got that? And I need more information. I need more statistics. Ping, 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 ping. I need to know why this is happening and why this is taking so long. And I want to know the last year's worth of historical data, and on and on and on. And he's not imagining what he should be imagining at this point is every additional word that comes out of his mouth, magnify that by 10, and that's extra work that not only I have to do, but the people that are doing the work have to do that are already behind.
Yeah, Jim, you're part of the problem. You are causing us more problems.
Right.
And it just goes back to, do you trust us to deliver the product that you want? If the answer is yes, then you need to stay out of our chili.
Well, here's the thing. I need his help because I don't have a solution to this problem. Like, it really does take 15 weeks to field a product that they're giving us every 10 weeks, utilizing all of the current processes and resources available to us. What we need is a quantum leap. I need either additional manpower or some type of automated delivery system, DevSecOps, just technical software stuff. But I need to automate some things that are happening manually right now, or I need more people to do them.
Okay.
And that's something he could influence is the person controlling the money.
And that's what you do. And when it comes down to those kinds of things, you tell him...
But he doesn't have more money, so he thinks he can substitute management for money.
He can't, but he's not your manager. And like at some point, you need to have... Like, I'm not saying you, but... Like,
I can tell I have to give you more information. Listeners, apologies. So here's the relationship. This system that I have is half in development and half in sustainment. It's an acquisition anomaly that happens with software where like you start building it, and then once it's good enough, you put part of it into service, but there's part of it you're still developing. He's in charge of the development part. I'm in charge of the sustainment part.
So the fact that you can't roll it out and start sustaining it fast enough is affecting his ability to roll out his products, which is affecting him.
Yes.
But he's not.
And he has a direct line to my boss, and so anything that he says he thinks needs to be done is probably going to get done, or something very similar to that.
Well, and this is the problem that exists, is the relationship between that guy and your boss is not defined clearly enough. Because your boss needs to draw the hard line and be like, listen, like, I understand your concerns. We're doing everything that we can. We'll let you know and keep you posted.
Yes. And that would be a good boss. And my boss does that sometimes. But this guy, Jim, as you're calling him, is very skilled in the leadership technique of what I call, why do you hate nuclear surety? He can frame, just like a good politician can frame anything that they want into their opponent trying to take food out of the mouths of school children and medicine away from senior citizens. Like he does this so skillfully. So if you were to say to him, I don't think it's beneficial for us to spend all this time gathering all these statistics on what's taking so long with this process. What we need to do is transition to the cloud. And he'll say, why do you hate quality software? Why do you hate delivering things on time? Why do you hate holding our contracts accountable for providing what we're paying them to do?
Well, You know what? That's an excellent question. And I just wish I had the manpower to be able to answer these questions. Maybe you should send somebody down here that can just sit in my office and just gather up all these numbers for you all day.
Yeah.
And then you could set them in a building
could be
across
that
the
cheeky.
base. Oh, God.
Now, for some reason at work, I feel like I have less to lose than I do in my church service, and I'm willing to speak up a bit more in these kinds of situations. But I also pick my battles, and I recognize when I can't win. And in a meeting where Jim is chairing the meeting and he's the one running it, I can't win. Like I'm gonna lose no matter what. So the only way to win is to just not speak up.
To not play.
But what happened this week is earlier in the week we had a meeting with Jim to prepare to meet with Jim's boss. And he kind of owns everything, and he's the one that controls our money flow. And he was going to do the same kind of thing: scrutinize our process and see why it's taken so long to develop our software and get it into service. And
all right, well, here comes the bus, Ben, and you know who's going to push you under it, right?
So it reaches the point where he's like, "Okay, so what ideas do we have for fixing this?" And Jim speaks up and says, "I think we need to micromanage everything, and we need to micromanage this, and we need to micromanage that, and we need to gather blah 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 blah."
Tell me he said micromanage. That would be great. Like if you're in a meeting and actually said micromanage, it'd be wonderful.
No, of course, he doesn't call it that. He doesn't think of it as that. He just thinks of it as good management. Not
obviously, everybody below me is an idiot, and so I need to be involved with everything, including things in buildings that I don't even are not in charge of.
Yes, and that is exactly what's happening with this. The reason that these things are hard to get into service is because they're technical and complex, and they're wicked problems. I mean, this is whatever. Yeah, it's hard. But what they're never weighing is the opportunity cost of all this additional management. And the opportunity cost is, like you said, it's making your people think you don't trust them. It's wasting their time. It's interrupting them. It's diverting their attention from the things they could be focusing on. Unless you think they're incompetent and unwilling to do their work, in which case then go ahead and micromanage them, I guess, if you can't get new people. But he doesn't weigh that in his equation when he's deciding to do this.
Well, these are the questions that never occur to the people that are like this.
Yes.
This is how they were managed. This is how they manage. They don't think about opportunity costs. They just think, obviously, since I'm not directly involved with it and I don't know every nut and bolt of this process, it must be broken somehow.
Right, exactly. So these guys over here that aren't getting their stuff done on time, the reason is they need somebody like me to come in and tell them to quit wasting time and to figure out all the ways in which they're wasting time and tell them to stop doing those things and start doing the right things.
And if you called them to the carpet, like if you somehow got them in a situation and asked them the question point blank, do you trust us to do this job or not? And then you would really get what he thinks. Like if he says yes, then like you just have to. He's not having that confrontation in his mind. He's not thinking of it in that way. Like, so do you trust this relationship? All right, go ahead.
I was at this point where I know the cost of him acting this way, and I know that it's not going to help solve the problem, but I have not yet reached the point where I have the brilliant solution to the problem. Like, I can't say, I don't think that's the answer, and here's the right answer. All I have was the first half.
Yeah, that's the thing. But I do have a suggestion for you.
Okay.
The next time Jim calls you to the carpet on why is this not flowing the way, and you have to pull up a pie graph of the hours spent like doing the work. Like, well, here's how we spend all our time.
Show his piece of the pie.
You need to have a piece of the pie.
Here's how much time we spend wasting on the stuff you're making us do.
And this admin slice right here, this wouldn't exist if Jim didn't email me twice a day.
Yeah. So in this meeting, we reached the point where Jim's boss said, "Okay, does anyone have any concerns?"
And Ben Rich decided to pull out his sword and fall on it right there in the meeting.
Sir, I have a concern. I do not think that this problem will be solved with this approach. I don't think we can micromanage our way, and I did use the term micromanage. I don't think we can micromanage our way to reducing the amount of time this takes by 50%. Not only that, but it will have a detrimental effect. It will waste people's time. It'll generate mistrust. It'll destroy lines of communication. It'll start people playing the blame game because when things get delayed, they're looking to not be the one getting finger pointed at, that they're the reason this is taking so long. And this will cost more than it's worth.
Ooh.
And there was a little bit of defensiveness popped up after that. But then almost immediately we were on a teleconference because we're all telecommuting right now. He goes, "Who was that raised that concern again just now?"
I'm gonna write that guy's name down.
And
He's now on my most wanted list.
I said, "Sir, it was me, Major Rich," and he knows me. He knows me. I don't know. He just didn't recognize my voice. Sir, it was me, Major Rich. He's like, I want everyone on this call to know that I'm not interested in groupthink. If you have a concern, bring it up. I don't want everyone just going with whatever the thing was. If you have a concern, this is the time to bring it out. I may not do what you want, but at least tell me what your concerns are so that I can use that information to make the best decision possible. And I felt completely vindicated.
Yes, but at the same time, you have to know that your picture is on Jim's wall and he's throwing darts at it.
It already was. It already was.
Ben Rich.
The magical situation would be if I had the right answer. Like, that's not going to work, sir, but this will. And here's the right answer.
This situation, of course, you don't have the right answer, because if you knew the answer, you would have been spouting that from the day that you walked into the building. Right. Like the fact that there is no clear answer. That's why you're in this situation in the first place. If there was a clear answer, you would have implemented it forever ago.
So I want to wrap this up and tie it back into where I started, which is the psychological, the big 5 personality traits.
Before you said something that I had mentally tagged that we need to go back to.
Okay.
And you said it like very nonchalantly, just kind of slid it in there, but you don't take breaths, so I've got to address it now. And it's for some reason, I'm just way more concerned about my church career right now than I am about my military career. And that's this kind of the gist of what you said. And I found that very, very interesting because, well, duh. Like, your military career has an expiration date. I'm sorry. The Air Force is going to be less without you. But that's a natural transition that you should be making deliberately, not as an accident. Like, you need to be looking at life after the Air Force. And like, it sounds a lot like this church thing could be the vessel or the vehicle from which you continue.
So, the church doesn't pay me anything, right?
I do know that, which is ridiculous. And so is there a paid vehicle?
Yeah, it's we operate what's called the lay ministry, which is just all volunteer service, and what a racket. So I have 2 callings right now. We call them callings. That at some point, one of my ecclesiastical leaders approached me and said, "Brother Rich, we recently lost our regional IT manager. We're looking for a new one. We understand you have the right skill set. Are you willing to do this? Yes or no?" Yes, I'm willing to do it. Okay. It's
a full-time job, but we call it a calling, so we don't have to pay you for it.
Okay, can you start tomorrow? Okay, I start tomorrow. And then I was also a seminary teacher, which meant that I taught a group of 16 and 17-year-olds 5 days a week from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. In the church building. So there was that hour of teaching and then probably another hour and a half of lesson planning every day. So that was 2 hours a day. So those were my 2 jobs I had. I was, the regional IT manager, and then the teaching the 16 and 17-year-old Bible study in the mornings. And then I was also teaching Sunday school to 10-year-olds on Sundays. And then they approached me and said, "Hey, we had a vacancy for the local bishop's executive secretary, managing his appointments, doing meetings and agendas and records and keeping and those kinds of things." And so they approached me with that. And then they released me as seminary teacher, and then the whole school year went and all that stuff. But anyway, so I'm not teaching seminary right now, but I am the regional IT manager, and I am the executive secretary to the bishop.
Which is ridiculous and amazing that you find time in the day. Like, does time move differently for you? Like, did you have to do you have to slow your perception of time to talk to me like a normal human being, or do you just not sleep like a vampire? Like, I don't understand.
It was worse in the first, 3 months of our podcast when I was trying to edit the podcast while I was also doing my seminary, and I was just not sleep is probably, it. And I also cut out a lot of just like personal things I was doing to make sure that I could do seminary, the IT stuff, my work, taking care of the family, doing the chores, and then also, recording and editing the podcast.
How and why? Like, I don't even I can't comprehend working 3 full-time jobs or 2 full-time and 1 part-time job, which it sounds like what you're kind of doing right now, and it's maintaining my sanity.
It's not that much of a full-time. I mean, right now with the COVID-19 shutdown, it's virtually nothing for any of the church stuff other than, receiving and sending emails with online meetings or whatever.
Just still, dude.
Yeah.
Regional. Like, when you say regional, you're not talking like a Little League region, like 3 towns. You're talking states.
No, Little League region, 3 towns.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I thought it was bigger than that.
No, no, no.
Okay.
I mean, the farthest one is an hour drive from here. So if I have to physically go there to do something, that's 2 hours just of travel, and then, yeah,
I hope you claim that on your tax return.
I can claim the taxes.
I know you claim.
I can also send the travel expense to the church and they'll pay it.
Oh, that's nice. But you also claim the miles.
Right. Yeah.
Listen, I'm a tax accountant, people. This is important stuff. Claim this.
Anyway, I was tying all that back into the conscientiousness aspect of this. That you and I both exist on a scale, and I think part of the reason that we have such an easygoing friendship is we exist roughly at about the same place on the conscientiousness. Like when you send me, or I send you an email about like when we should record the podcast, or a text or something like that, there's not one of us pinging the other more. Like, you aren't like, oh my gosh, she said this, but I said that, and I don't know what time it is, and I'll send him 3 more texts about it. Like, that would be a mismatch in our conscientiousness levels. But we're roughly the same. Like, you tell me when you think it's going to be, that's about when I thought it was going to be. Whoops, it was off by an hour. Okay, I'll adjust. Or you adjust. And that doesn't stress either one of us out too much. I don't think it does.
No, not at all. And then when we were in the military, we first met, we were kind of at the same level where, like, whatever one person was told to do, we just did it. Like, that's the way I see this. This whole conscientious, like, people do it to different degrees, but the way I've rolled all of this up is, like, the things that you're supposed to do you do them, and to what degree do you do them?
Yeah. But if you go too high, the article I found about this conscientiousness, if you go too high on it, then you get into things like, when taken to an extreme, they may also be workaholics, perfectionists, and compulsive in their behavior. It starts to become negative.
Well, and that's interesting because I feel like some things I do are compulsive, and some things I do I'm very perfectionist, but I am definitely not a workaholic.
Right. So farther down in the article, almost buried, is this interesting thing that cites a study. It says, a study from 2004 found conscientiousness was significantly negatively correlated with intelligence.
Really?
Yeah.
Negatively correlated. So more intelligent people are less conscientious.
Yes. Or less intelligent people are the most conscientious.
That makes sense. Like, if you... so we might be defining intelligence in different ways, but roughly the way that I think of intelligence is not education or how many books you've read, but the raw horsepower that your brain has to solve problems.
Yes. And to give you one more sentence, conscientiousness significantly correlated negatively with abstract reasoning and verbal reasoning.
Yeah. So the raw horsepower of your brain.
Yes.
Which makes sense that if you don't have a lot of raw horsepower, like, the only way that you're going to get by in life is just do what you're told and just do it really well and just keep doing it.
Exactly. So that goes back to my cops versus my comm technicians. The cops got the lowest possible score on the vocational aptitude battery, and they got made cops, and they're just expected to run their checklist. Not to say that smart people don't want to be cops sometimes, and my comm guys, they got the highest possible score on the vocational aptitude battery, and they're expected to utilize their higher reasoning processes to solve complex problems.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. When I deployed with the Army, I had a real problem with the way that we treat airmen in the Air Force versus the way they treat troops in the Army is totally different because the expectations are different. Like, and the way I always boiled this down was, in the Air Force, when we tell an airman to go fix a plane, if he sees something out of place, we need him to have the ability to identify, recognize that something's wrong, and the ability and the intelligence to kind of branch out, like, okay, what do I do in this situation, and solve the problem. Whereas an Army troop, when you tell him, go charge the hill, you don't want him to stop and say, well, hang on, sir, is there a better way that maybe we could do this? Like, you need him to just go up the freaking hill.
Yeah, there's a need for a higher degree of compliance in that kind of situation.
Right.
Rather than critical thinking.
Yes. So the things they screen people for those things, and they put them in jobs accordingly.
But that also goes to that section I read about how at the highest levels, the CEO levels, they have a very low degree of conscientiousness.
Of course they do. Of course CEOs do. Executives don't fall anywhere in any. First of all, the pool of executives at that level is so small that they cannot be representative of any larger statistical body. They are always, 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 by definition, going to be outliers of some scale. So they don't fall well into any of these, like, boxes. And it makes sense that the most successful people in the world, like the person at the top of the pyramid, of course it's going to be a freaking oddball guy, because any normal worker bees cannot get to that level doing the things that they do. You always have to do some craziness. You always have to be in some really random situation with this convergence of opportunity and expertise, and just so many things have to line up perfectly. And you have to be the kind of person that recognizes it and grabs it in order to get to those positions. That has nothing to do almost with the personality traits that you want as an employee.
But there's this weird thing about the military in that anyone that's at the very top, unless we're talking about elected civilian leaders who can just jump straight to the top, has to have gone through all the ranks. And in the middle, you pointed out how they tend to value those people that will come in and work 16-hour days, even if they're inefficient and ineffective, just because they've shown the willingness to show that degree of commitment.
So when I flew drones for 8-hour shifts every day for years, I had a lot of time to think about how the military develops and promotes leadership, because I really hated my leadership at the time. And I was like, how did these people get to where they are? And the answer is, like, if you look at a bell curve, like everybody lives on this bell curve, the people at the very bottom end of this bell curve, they get filtered out. Like they go away. Like they're not good enough. They don't make the cut. And eventually they fall off the wagon. The people at the very top of the bell curve, my theory is that they recognize that their skills aren't being valued as highly as they should be, and they leave and they go do other amazing things. You hear about some of the best guys that, like, oh yeah, he was a captain and he got out and he immediately became like the associate director of freaking intelligence at some, organization somewhere.
Right.
Those, like, and I know some of those guys.
Not all of them, though.
Not all of them, but here's the thing. The fact of the matter is the performance reports in the military is for officers, 8 bullets or something?
9.
So nine. Okay, 9. Excuse me, 9 bullets. So you, Ben Rich, the top of the ladder, the cream of the cream, like just the best guy in the world, has to boil down your accomplishments to 9 bullets. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, the guy that shows up to work every day and just heats his seat, he only has to come up with 9 things to put on his piece of paper. And what that does is it makes him look a little better and it makes you look a little worse. It just shoves everybody towards the middle, which creates the system that just perpetuates mediocrity. People that recognize, or maybe consciously or subconsciously, that they're in a good gig, if they just keep checking their boxes, they can continue to progress, and then that they'll just get through it. And this is like every major and captain in the Air Force. And then you start talking about senior leaders, you make that transition, lieutenant colonel, and into the flag ranks. Now we're talking about the guys that are not only mediocre, but at the higher end of the spectrum for charismatic traits. They're political people now, because when you talk about 06 and above, that is 100% a good old boys club. That is, I think so-and-so would be good in this position, and that's how they get those jobs. It has nothing to do, it has very little to do with aptitude or capacity or capability. Now, I'm not saying that these people aren't very good at what they do. I'm not saying that they're bad leaders. I'm not saying that they're unintelligent. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be where they are. What I'm saying is that they're not going to be the type of people that line up with these CEO attributes. They're not the people that are going to start Fortune, 2,000 companies or whatever out of nothing. They're not going to be, Jeff Bezos would never have made it in the military.
Right. I've had some great, I've worked closely with some 4-stars in my career just because of where I've been on staffs. And we tend to find really good people in those positions. Like my last general officer at Headquarters United States Transportation Command, General McDough, he was phenomenal. Like he is, when you imagine like a Fortune 500 CEO, he was that level of person. Just a gentleman and a scholar, incredibly adept at everything that he needed to do, very strategic thinker, everything. I mean, he was amazing.
But what was this is when you talk about executive level leadership like that, what really is his job? Like his job is very political. His job is feeling out what the requirements of his position are and then just tagging the experts that work for him to do it.
Yeah, and to kind of stay out of their way, but to also provide them enough strategic direction that they're charging the right objective. And then get Congress to give him the money he needs to do it.
Right, but those are political aspects. This is what I'm saying, is that at that level, it's a lot less about capacity and intelligence so much as it is about managing relationships with other people.
Oh, but he was a master. His commander's calls where he would talk to his staff just made me feel valued and appreciated. I felt like he was communicating his vision to me. And then watching him talk to Congress, I felt like he knew all of them by name, and he was, managing the ones that could potentially be his enemy. Oh, he was just amazing.
I'm hyperventilating over here because you're describing political skills. You're not saying anything about his intelligence. You're not saying anything about his capacity to solve problems or actually do the mission. You're talking about an interpersonal relationship. He made you feel valued. He conveyed his vision that somebody wrote for him to you. He is a people person and has people skill sets. That doesn't say anything about his capacity to do anything besides that. That's what I'm saying is,
but when you're a 4-star managing global transportation for America's war machine, like, the task is pretty well defined. I mean, it's not this abstract thing. He's got to move beans and bullets to the warfighter.
This is what I'm saying. He doesn't have to do any of that. He just has to be able to identify the people that can and make them do it. The leaders in the military at that level are far more political than they are competent in any other sense.
I don't disagree with that.
And that's the point that I'm trying to make.
No. As complex as those kinds of things can be, we still have situations where, like, we're reaching the point where our technology has developed where somebody can still send in like an essay to an essay contest that was written entirely by a computer, and it can get accepted and win the contest. I don't know if you've heard about these kinds of things. I'll put a link to a story that this has actually happened.
Of course that's happened. Have you seen the kind of essays that people write? Like, I just finished my master's degree, and some of the incoherent nonsense that my coworkers, thank you, I appreciate that. But some of the incoherent nonsense that my fellow students were posting up, I'm like, wait, does this guy not speak English? Like, seriously, what is he writing here?
Yeah. So while all that's happening, we still, every time you want to fill out a form online, you got to click on the little thing where you choose the frames of the photo that don't have cars in them or whatever like that. And that can fool a machine. So
those are much more about machine learning than they are about verifying that we're humans, but that's fine. Go ahead.
Even though artificial intelligence can still fool us in some ways, there's other things we can give it to do that are easy for an average human being that absolutely baffle artificial intelligence. And so I think we can have a good discussion on this. So there's an article I found online that I'm going to send to you. It's on Quanta Magazine called Common Sense Comes Closer to Computers. And it's about trying to define the very vague and incomprehensible set of questions and base of knowledge that constitute artificial intelligence and how to program that into a computer.
Well, and that just begs the question, what is common sense? Like, common sense is very uncommon. Like, the ability to get out of bed in the morning and get to work without being killed. I think, is that the skill set we're talking about?
No,
or is that the how much are you supposed to tip for a semi-rude but very quick waiter at a restaurant?
Yes, that more so that. So I will put that was a great example. I'll put a link to that article in the show notes, so if our readers want to read along, so they can feel like they're participating when we have this discussion next time. Our listeners. Thank you to our listeners. Thanks to those of you who support us by participating in the discussions online, by liking our page on Facebook or rating us on your favorite podcast player. Thanks to our Patreon supporters, and as always, thanks for listening to the podcast and sharing with your friends.
Yeah, and during these tough times where we're all stuck in our house, we do have the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge, which we haven't talked about because you, sir, don't weigh in every week like you're supposed to.
Have I not weighed in this week?
No, I don't think you have, last I checked. Anyway, if you need some motivation or you feel like you need some accountability buddies to keep you fit, go to the badatmagic.live website and hit the fitness challenge link at the top of the page. You can sign up totally anonymously. It doesn't show your weight. It doesn't show your body fat. It just shows the change in your body fat from week to week. And we're all trying to create a community and help each other out through this tough time where it's just really tough to get motivated to do anything exercise-y. There may be prizes at the end for the people that lose the most % body fat, and there may be bad prizes for people that lose or that gain the most body fat, probably.
I think I might be vying for that prize right now.
So one more way that we're trying to get our listeners involved in just the community and develop. And thank you all for listening very much. If you like some of the incoherent nonsense that Ben and I spout, you can support us on Patreon. Send us some love, or just jump on the Facebook and the social media like Ben was talking about and talk to us. We love our listeners.